The smoke still rose in thick black columns against the azure Nevada sky when Adelaide Crawford dragged herself from the twisted metal wreckage, her silk traveling dress torn beyond recognition, and her mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The westbound train had been carrying her toward Sacramento, toward a marriage arrangement she had never wanted but had accepted out of duty to her Philadelphia family. And now it lay scattered across the desert landscape like a child's forgotten toys. Blood trickled from a gash above her eyebrow, and her left ankle screamed with pain every time she tried to put weight on it. But Adelaide knew she had to move away from the wreckage before the fires spread further. She could hear screams behind her, the terrible sounds of injured passengers trapped in the twisted cars. But when she turned back to help, a secondary explosion knocked her forward onto the sun-baked earth and sent her crawling away on hands and knees. The year was 1878, and Adelaide had never felt so alone in her 22 years of life. She stumbled forward through the scrub brush and desert sage, not knowing if she was moving toward help or deeper into danger. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on her bare head, her traveling hat lost somewhere in the chaos of the derailment. Her ears still rang from the explosion, and she could taste copper and ash on her tongue. Every breath felt like inhaling fire, and her vision swam with dark spots that threatened to pull her under into unconsciousness. She had to keep moving, had to find water, had to find help, but the Nevada desert stretched endlessly in every direction. Adelaide had no idea how long she walked. Time became meaningless under that blazing sun. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and her lips cracked and bled. The pain in her ankle had transformed from sharp agony to a dull, throbbing numbness that worried her more than the initial injury. She had removed her corset shortly after leaving the wreckage, unable to breathe properly in its constricting embrace, and had left it behind like a shed skin. Her once elegant traveling ensemble now hung in tatters, the expensive fabric no match for the harsh desert environment. She thought about her family back in Philadelphia, about her younger sisters who had envied her Western adventure, about her mother who had wept when Adelaide left. They would never know what happened to her. They would wait for letters that would never come. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when Adelaide finally collapsed. She had climbed a small rise, hoping to see something, anything that might indicate civilization. But there was only more desert. Her body simply gave out, folding beneath her like a marionette with cut strings. She lay there on the hard-packed earth, staring up at the impossibly blue sky, and wondered if this was how her story would end. 22 years old, dying alone in the Nevada desert, never having truly lived at all. The marriage she had been traveling toward had been arranged by her father, a business transaction more than a romantic union. She had never been kissed, never been held by someone who loved her, never experienced any of the things she had read about in the novels she kept hidden under her bed back home. She must have drifted into unconsciousness because when she opened her eyes again, the sky had transformed into shades of orange and purple, and a shadow fell across her face. Adelaide tried to focus, tried to make sense of the shape blocking the dying sun's light, and slowly the shadow resolved into the figure of a man on horseback. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, with a worn hat pulled low over his face. For a moment, Adelaide thought she might be hallucinating, that her desperate mind had conjured this image of rescue from nothing but hope and heat exhaustion. "Madam?" The voice was deep and rough, tinged with concern. "Madam, can you hear me?" Adelaide tried to respond, but her throat was too dry. Only a rasping croak emerged. She saw the man dismount with quick, efficient movements, and then he was kneeling beside her, his face coming into focus. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a startling green, made more vivid by the contrast with his tanned skin. A several-day growth of beard shadowed his jaw, and dust covered his clothes, marking him as someone who lived and worked in this harsh environment. "Easy now," he said, his voice gentling as he slipped one arm under her shoulders and lifted her slightly. "I've got water, just small sips, you hear me?" Adelaide nodded weakly as he brought a canteen to her lips. The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the most glorious thing she had ever experienced. She wanted to gulp it down, to drain the entire container, but he pulled it away after only a few swallows. "More in a minute," he explained. "Too much too fast will just make you sick. What happened to you? You come from that train wreck?" Adelaide managed to nod again. Derailed, she whispered, her voice returning slightly. Explosion. I walked. The cowboy's expression darkened. That was nearly 8 miles back. How long you been out here? Don't know. The words came easier now, though speaking still hurt. Hours since afternoon. He studied her for a long moment, his green eyes moving over her injuries with a practiced assessment. You're hurt pretty bad. That ankle's swollen up like a melon, and you've got a nasty gash on your head. I'm going to have to get you to town, but it's a hard ride from here. You think you can hold on if I carry you? I can try, Adelaide said, though she honestly had no idea if she could manage it. That'll have to do. He gave her another small drink of water, then stood and walked back to his horse, a large roan gelding that watched the proceedings with calm, intelligent eyes. The cowboy pulled a bedroll from behind his saddle and brought it back to Adelaide, wrapping it around her shoulders despite the lingering heat. You'll be shivering once the sun goes down proper. Desert cold is just as deadly as desert heat. He was right. Adelaide was already beginning to feel the temperature drop as the sun sank lower. The cowboy studied her for another moment, then made a decision. With surprising gentleness for such a large man, he scooped her up into his arms, bedroll and all. Adelaide gasped at the sudden movement, pain shooting through her ankle, but he held her securely against his chest. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I know it hurts, but we need to get moving. It's a 2-hour ride to Columbia, and that's pushing hard. I don't like traveling this country in full dark, but we don't have much choice. Adelaide wanted to ask why the dark was dangerous, wanted to know his name, wanted to know how he had found her, but exhaustion was pulling at her again. She felt him lift her up onto the horse, felt him swing up behind her, his arm coming around her waist to hold her steady against his chest. The horse started moving, and Adelaide let her head fall back against the cowboy's shoulder, too tired to maintain the proper distance that Philadelphia society would have demanded. Name's Nathan Steele, the cowboy said after they had ridden for a while. I run cattle between here and Sacramento. What's yours? Adelaide Crawford, she managed. Philadelphia. I was traveling to Sacramento for a wedding. Your wedding? Something in his tone made Adelaide think he cared about the answer. Yes, arranged marriage, never met him. She felt Nathan's arm tighten slightly around her waist. Well, Miss Crawford from Philadelphia, you just hold on tight. I'll get you to Columbia safe. There's a doctor there, Doc Harrison. He'll fix you up proper. The ride became a blur of pain and exhaustion. Adelaide drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse's gait, the warmth of Nathan's body behind her, and the strength of his arm holding her secure. She heard him talking to her sometimes, his deep voice rumbling in his chest, though she couldn't always make out the words. He was trying to keep her awake, she realized dimly, trying to keep her from slipping away entirely. Talk to me, Adelaide, he said at one point, his voice urgent. Tell me about Philadelphia. What's it like there? Cold, she whispered. Proper. Everyone watching everyone else. Rules for everything. Sounds suffocating. It was. The admission surprised her. She had never said it out loud before, never acknowledged even to herself how trapped she had felt in that world of drawing rooms and calling cards and endless expectations. The West is different, Nathan said. Out here, what matters is what you can do, not who your family is. It's hard country, but it's honest. Adelaide wanted to ask him more, wanted to know what had brought him to this harsh landscape, but darkness was pulling at her again. She fought it, remembering the urgency in his voice, understanding that staying awake was somehow important. Stay with me, Nathan said, and there was something in his voice that made Adelaide obey, that made her force her eyes open and focus on staying present. That's good. You're doing real good. Tell me more. You got family back in Philadelphia? 2 sisters, younger, mother, father. Speaking in fragments was all she could manage. Father arranged the marriage, business partner's son. Never asked what I wanted. What did you want? Nathan's question was soft, almost lost in the sound of hoofbeats. Adelaide had never been asked that question. In her world, what a woman wanted was irrelevant. She existed to make a good marriage, to manage a household, to produce children and maintain social standing. But Nathan had asked, and something about the darkness, the pain, the strange intimacy of being held in his arms as they rode through the night made Adelaide answer honestly. I wanted to choose, she said. I wanted to matter. I wanted someone to look at me and see Adelaide, not just a suitable wife for a good connection or a proper lady. "I see Adelaide," Nathan said quietly, "and she's one of the bravest people I've ever met. Walking 8 miles through the desert with a busted ankle and a head injury. That takes real courage." Tears stung Adelaide's eyes, though whether from pain or emotion she couldn't have said. No one had ever called her brave before. No one had ever suggested she was anything more than decorative and dutiful. The lights of Columbia appeared like stars brought down to earth, yellow glows in the darkness that grew brighter as they approached. Nathan urged his horse faster, and Adelaide bit down on a cry as the increased pace jarred her injuries. She could feel Nathan's tension, the urgency in how he held her, and understood that her condition was worse than she had realized. Columbia, California was a gold rush town that had evolved into something more permanent, its streets lined with brick buildings and wooden boardwalks. Even at this late hour, there were people out, miners and merchants and women in brightly colored dresses who called out greetings to Nathan as he rode past. He ignored them all, heading straight for a neat white house at the edge of town with a sign that read, "Dr. Harrison, Physician and Surgeon." Nathan dismounted in one smooth motion, then carefully lifted Adelaide down from the horse. She heard him kick at the door, heard him calling for the doctor, and then there were more voices and bright lamplight and hands examining her. Adelaide tried to focus, tried to stay present, but the pain was overwhelming now that they had stopped moving, now that she wasn't concentrating on holding on. "Train wreck survivor," she heard Nathan saying. "Found her about 8 miles east, been walking through the desert for hours. Twisted ankle, head wound, severe dehydration." "Get her inside," another voice commanded, older and authoritative. "Mrs. Harrison, I need water heated in my surgical kit. Nathan, you bring her straight to the examination room." Adelaide felt herself being carried again, felt herself being laid down on something soft. Hands peeled away her torn dress, and she heard a woman's shocked gasp at the state of her injuries. Someone was cleaning the wound on her head, and it hurt so badly that Adelaide finally let the darkness take her. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through lace curtains, and Adelaide was in a real bed, clean and bandaged, wearing a soft cotton nightgown that wasn't hers. For a long moment, she lay still, trying to piece together what had happened. The train wreck, the desert, Nathan Steele carrying her to safety. She moved slightly and winced as pain shot through her ankle, but it was manageable now, dulled by whatever medicine the doctor had given her. "You're awake." The voice came from beside the bed, and Adelaide turned her head carefully to find Nathan sitting in a wooden chair, his hat on his knees, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "Doc said you'd probably come around this morning. How do you feel?" "Like I was in a train wreck," Adelaide said, and was surprised when Nathan laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made something flutter in her chest. "Fair enough. Doc Harrison says you're going to be fine. The ankle isn't broken, just badly sprained. Should heal up in a few weeks if you stay off it. The head wound looked worse than it was, all that blood. He stitched you up neat. You'll have a small scar, but your hair will cover it." Adelaide reached up carefully and felt bandages wrapped around her head. "How long have you been here?" "Since last night. Wanted to make sure you were all right." Nathan stood, stretching out his back, and Adelaide could see the exhaustion in his face. "I should let you rest. Mrs. Harrison will be in soon to check on you." "Wait." Adelaide wasn't ready for him to leave. "You saved my life. I never properly thanked you?" Nathan's expression softened. "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. But you're the one who did it. You're the one who found me." Adelaide met his eyes, those startling green eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. "Why were you out there? In the middle of nowhere?" "I've got a ranch about 15 miles south of here. Was tracking some cattle that wandered off when I saw the smoke from the wreck. Rode out to see if anyone needed help." He hesitated, then added, "I'm real glad I did." Before Adelaide could respond, the door opened, and a plump, kind-faced woman in her 50s bustled in, carrying a tray. "Oh, good. You're awake. I'm Martha Harrison, the doctor's wife. You gave us quite a scare last night, dear. Nathan, you go home and get some rest. I'll take care of Miss Crawford." Nathan nodded, settling his hat on his head. He looked at Adelaide for a long moment, and she thought she saw something in his expression that matched the strange feeling in her own chest. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, and Adelaide felt his absence like a physical thing. Harrison set about making Adelaide comfortable, helping her sip broth and water, changing her bandages with efficient gentleness. She chattered as she worked, filling Adelaide in on the details she had missed. The train wreck was terrible, just terrible. They brought the survivors into town last night and this morning. 20 people dead, they're saying, and twice that many injured. You're lucky to be alive, dear. The railroad is setting up at the hotel, trying to sort out who was on the train and getting telegrams sent to families. You'll need to let them know you survived. Adelaide thought of her family in Philadelphia, thought of the telegrams that would be sent, and felt a strange numbness. They would expect her to continue to Sacramento once she recovered, to fulfill the marriage arrangement. The thought made her feel ill in a way that had nothing to do with her injuries. There's also the matter of your fiancé, Mrs. Harrison continued, confirming Adelaide's fears. The railroad found your ticket and identified you from the passenger manifest. They sent a telegram to Sacramento this morning. Your intended is on his way here. Of course he was. Adelaide closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She had been given a taste of something different, a glimpse of another possibility, and now it was being taken away. She would marry James Whitmore, would move into his large house in Sacramento, would become Mrs. Whitmore and live out the life that had been planned for her. It didn't matter that when she thought about being held in someone's arms, it wasn't James she imagined, but a green-eyed cowboy who had called her brave. Over the next 3 days, Adelaide remained at the Harrison house, recovering her strength. Nathan came to visit each afternoon, always bringing something, a handful of wildflowers, a book he thought she might enjoy, news from town. They talked for hours, Adelaide learning about his life on the ranch, about how he had come west from Ohio 5 years ago looking for something he couldn't quite name. He told her about raising cattle, about the challenges of the land, about building something with his own hands. In turn, Adelaide found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about feeling invisible in her own life, about reading adventure novels and dreaming of horizons beyond Philadelphia's carefully manicured streets. You could stay, Nathan said on the third day, the words coming out in a rush. I know it's not proper. I know it's not my place to say. But Adelaide, you don't have to go to Sacramento. You don't have to marry a man you've never met. Adelaide's heart hammered in her chest. Nathan, I can't. My family, the arrangement, I gave my word. Did you? Or did your father give his word and expect you to honor it? Nathan leaned forward in his chair, intensity blazing in his green eyes. You said you wanted to choose, so choose. Choose your own life. It's not that simple. But even as Adelaide said it, she wondered if it really wasn't. She was in California, thousands of miles from Philadelphia. The train wreck had freed her from the immediate obligation to reach Sacramento. What if she simply didn't go? What if she stayed? It could be that simple, Nathan said softly, if you wanted it to be. Before Adelaide could respond, they heard a commotion downstairs, raised voices in the front hall, Mrs. Harrison's voice, then a man's voice, cultured and impatient. Adelaide's stomach sank. That'll be my fiancé, she said quietly. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he stood and stepped back from the bed, putting proper distance between them. A moment later, Mrs. Harrison appeared in the doorway, her expression disapproving. Mr. Whitmore to see you, Miss Crawford. I told him you needed rest, but he insisted. The man who entered behind Mrs. Harrison was exactly what Adelaide had expected. Tall, well-dressed, handsome in a cold, refined way. James Whitmore was perhaps 35, with dark hair carefully pomaded and a mustache waxed to sharp points. He looked at Adelaide with the same expression one might give a horse being considered for purchase, assessing and analytical. Adelaide, he said, not asking permission to use her first name. I came as soon as I received word. You look dreadful. It wasn't concern in his voice, but complaint, as if her injuries were a personal inconvenience. Adelaide felt Nathan tense beside the window where he had retreated. Thank you for coming, Mr. Whitmore, Adelaide said, keeping her voice level. As you can see, I survived. Indeed, though this unfortunate incident has complicated our arrangements considerably. The wedding was scheduled for next week. Obviously, that will have to be postponed. James pulled a chair close to the bed without being invited to sit. I've made arrangements at the hotel. Once the doctor clears you to travel, we'll proceed to Sacramento. I've sent word to your father that you're alive and that the wedding will take place as soon as you're presentable. The casual dismissal in his tone, the assumption that Adelaide would simply comply, sparked something rebellious in her chest. She glanced at Nathan, who was watching James with barely concealed dislike, and made a decision that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Actually, Mr. Whitmore, I'm not sure I'll be traveling to Sacramento at all." The room went silent. James stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. Mrs. Harrison's hand flew to her mouth. Nathan's expression remained carefully neutral, but Adelaide saw hope kindle in his eyes. "I beg your pardon?" James finally said, his tone icy. "I said I'm not sure I'll be traveling to Sacramento. The train wreck, it made me realize how short life is, how precious. I don't want to spend mine in a marriage of convenience to a man I don't know and who doesn't care to know me." James's face darkened. "You're being hysterical. It's the injury. Clearly you're not thinking straight. Doctor, surely you have something to calm her nerves?" "Miss Crawford seems perfectly lucid to me, Doctor," Harrison said from the doorway, where he had appeared at some point during the conversation. "And she has every right to make decisions about her own future." "This is outrageous." James stood abruptly. "I have a contract with her father. I've made arrangements, financial commitments. She cannot simply change her mind." "Actually, she can," Nathan said quietly, speaking for the first time since James arrived. "Last I checked, we abolished slavery. A person can't be forced into marriage against their will." James turned his cold gaze on Nathan, taking in his worn clothes and working man's appearance. "And who exactly are you?" "Nathan Steele. I'm the one who found Miss Crawford in the desert and brought her to safety." "Ah, yes, the cowboy. How noble." James's tone dripped with condescension. "I'm sure Miss Crawford is very grateful for your assistance. However, this is a private family matter that doesn't concern you." "It concerns me if Adelaide says it does," Nathan replied evenly. The use of her first name, the quiet claim in it, sent a thrill through Adelaide. She saw James register it too, saw understanding and anger flash across his face. "I see what's happened here," James said, his voice tight. "You've been seduced by some romantic notion, turned by a pretty face and rough charm. Let me be clear, Adelaide. If you break this engagement, your father will disown you. You'll have nothing, no money, no family support, no prospects. Is that really what you want? To throw away everything for a cattle rancher? Put like that, it sounded foolish. Adelaide had no money of her own, no skills that would allow her to support herself. Her entire life had been preparation for marriage and managing a household. What did she think would happen if she refused to marry James? That Nathan would simply take care of her? They barely knew each other. A few afternoons of conversation didn't constitute a foundation for a life together. But then Adelaide remembered lying in the desert, thinking she would die without ever having truly lived. She remembered Nathan's arm around her waist as they rode through the darkness, remembered his voice calling her brave. She thought about a future in Sacramento as Mrs. Whitmore, attending social functions and managing servants and living a life of the comfortable emptiness. And she thought about staying in Columbia, in this rough gold rush town, where a woman's worth wasn't measured solely by her family connections. "What I want," Adelaide said slowly, choosing her words with care, "is time to recover from my injuries and consider my options. I'm not making any commitments or decisions right now, not to you, not to anyone." It wasn't the dramatic declaration she had almost made, but it was honest. She needed time to think, to understand what was practical versus what was merely a fantasy born of trauma and gratitude. James's expression hardened further. "You have 1 week. I'll remain in Columbia that long, no longer. At the end of that week, you'll either agree to proceed to Sacramento as planned, or I'll consider our engagement broken and inform your father accordingly. I trust that's clear enough." He left without another word, his expensive boots clicking sharply on the wooden floors. In the silence that followed, Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. The weight of the decision before her was crushing. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Nathan said gently, moving back to sit beside the bed. "James Whitmore is a jackass, but he's not wrong about one thing. You need to think about what's practical, what will actually work." "You're saying I should marry him?" Adelaide couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. "No." Nathan took her hand carefully, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. "I'm saying you should think about what you really want, and then we'll figure out how to make it work. Because Adelaide, if what you want is to stay here, to build a different kind of life, I'll help you do that. Not because you owe me anything, not because I expect anything from you, but but because in 3 days I've come to care about you more than is probably wise." Adelaide's breath caught. "Nathan, we barely know each other." "That's true, which is why I'm not asking you to marry me, not asking you to make any promises. I'm just saying, if you want time to figure out who Adelaide Crawford really is and what she really wants, you can have that time. Mrs. Harrison here runs a boarding house for respectable young women. You could stay there while your ankle heals, maybe find some work in town, get to know Columbia, get to know yourself, get to know me if you want, and then, when you're ready, you can decide what comes next." It was a lifeline, a middle path between the two extremes. Adelaide looked at Mrs. Harrison, who was nodding. "It's true, dear. I've got a room available, and I'd be happy to have you. You seem like a smart girl. Maybe Miss Thornton at the dress shop could use help, or the school is always looking for someone who can teach proper writing and arithmetic. You've got options." Adelaide felt something loosen in her chest, felt possibility open up before her like the Nevada sky. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "I'd like that very much." Over the next week, Adelaide began to discover what it meant to live on her own terms. Mrs. Harrison's boarding house was comfortable and respectable, home to 3 other young women who worked in Columbia's various establishments. There was Sarah, who worked at the general store, Mary, who was a seamstress, and young Lily, who helped at the schoolhouse. They welcomed Adelaide warmly, helping her navigate the practical realities of life as a working woman in the West. Miss Thornton, who ran the dress shop, hired Adelaide to help with accounts and to teach her more refined sewing techniques, skills Adelaide had learned as part of her Philadelphia education. The work was different from anything Adelaide had done before, actual labor that resulted in wages she earned herself. The first time Miss Thornton paid her, placing coins in her palm, Adelaide felt a rush of pride and independence that was almost intoxicating. Nathan visited often, always proper, always respectful of the boundaries Adelaide needed. He took her on walks as her ankle healed, showing her around Columbia and the surrounding countryside. They talked endlessly, discovering shared interests and laughing over differences. Nathan told her about his ranch, the Rolling S, how he had built it from nothing, with the help of a few good men and sheer stubborn determination. Adelaide told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about the books she loved and the dreams she had buried under layers of propriety. "What did you dream about?" Nathan asked one afternoon as they sat by the creek that ran behind the boarding house. Adelaide's healing ankle propped up on a smooth rock. "Freedom, mostly," Adelaide admitted, "though I didn't have a name for it then. I used to read about explorers and pioneers, about women who did something more than just manage households. I wanted to matter in some way that was bigger than being someone's wife or someone's mother. You could still be those things and matter," Nathan pointed out. "Being a wife or mother doesn't mean giving up who you are. At least, it shouldn't." "Is that what you want?" Adelaide asked, emboldened by weeks of growing familiarity. "A wife and family?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, watching the water flow over stones. "I didn't think I did," he finally said. "I came west to build something, to prove I could make it on my own. Romance seemed like a distraction from that. But then I found a woman in the desert, and she was brave and honest and made me laugh. And suddenly I started thinking maybe having someone to build a life with wouldn't be a distraction at all. Maybe it would make everything better." Adelaide's heart was racing. "Nathan, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you're still figuring things out. I'm not asking for an answer, Adelaide. I'm just being honest about what I feel. You wanted someone to see you, to really see Adelaide, and I do. I see a woman who's smart and strong and kind. I see someone I could love for the rest of my life, if she'd let me." The tears that slipped down Adelaide's cheeks weren't sad ones. "I see you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me how much I want this. Want you, when I'm still not sure who I am, without all the expectations I grew up with." "Then keep figuring it out," Nathan said, reaching over to gently wipe away her tears. "I'm not going anywhere." The week James had given her came and went. When he came to the boarding house demanding an answer, Adelaide met him in the front parlor with her head high and her voice steady. "I'm breaking our engagement, Mr. Whitmore. I'm sorry if this causes you inconvenience, but I can't marry you. I don't love you, and I don't believe you love me. We'd both be miserable." James's face flushed with anger. "You're a fool. You think this cowboy is going to marry you? You think he'll want you once the novelty wears off? You'll end up alone and penniless, and it'll serve you right. Maybe, Adelaide said calmly, but at least I'll be alone and penniless on my own terms, having made my own choices. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore. I wish you well. After he left, Adelaide sat in the parlor and waited for regret or fear to overwhelm her. Instead, she felt light, unburdened, free in a way she had never experienced. She had chosen herself, had claimed her own life, and whatever came next would be hers. Her father's response to the broken engagement came via telegram 2 days later. It was brief and brutal. You are no longer my daughter. Do not contact this family again. Adelaide cried when she read it, mourned the loss of her sisters and mother, grieved for relationships that had apparently been conditional on her obedience. But underneath the grief was a foundation of certainty. She had made the right choice. The months that followed were the happiest and most challenging of Adelaide's life. She continued working at the dress shop, her skills and education making her valuable enough that Miss Thornton raised her wages twice. She made friends in Columbia, real friends who valued her for herself rather than her family connections. And she spent as much time as propriety allowed with Nathan, their relationship deepening from attraction into something far more profound. Nathan courted her properly, with dances at the town hall and dinners at the hotel restaurant. He brought her small gifts, thoughtful things that showed he paid attention to what she liked. He introduced her to his ranch hands, good men who treated her with respect and welcomed her presence. And slowly, carefully, he let her see all the parts of his life, the hard work and the satisfaction, the challenges and the rewards. I want to show you something, Nathan said one sunny afternoon in late summer, nearly 4 months after the train wreck. They were riding toward his ranch, Adelaide having become confident on horseback through Nathan's patient teaching. They crested a small hill, and Adelaide gasped. Spread out below them was the Rolling S Ranch, larger and more prosperous looking than she had imagined. A neat ranch house sat at the center. Corrals and outbuildings arranged efficiently around it. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see men working near the barns. It's beautiful, Adelaide said sincerely. It's home, Nathan replied. And Adelaide, I want you to think about something. I know we've been taking things slow, giving you time to be sure, but I need you to know that I'm sure. I'm sure about you, about us, about wanting to build a life together. So, I'm asking, properly this time, Adelaide Crawford, will you marry me? Adelaide's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Nathan, this good man who had found her when she was lost and had given her the space to find herself. She thought about the life they could build together, partnership instead of ownership, respect instead of obligation. She thought about waking up beside him every morning, about building something real and lasting in this wild, beautiful country. Yes, she said, her voice strong and clear. Yes, Nathan Steele, I'll marry you. Nathan's face lit up with a joy so pure it made Adelaide's heart ache. He dismounted quickly and lifted her down from her horse, pulling her into his arms for their first real kiss. It was everything Adelaide had dreamed about, and nothing like she had imagined, both gentle and passionate, a promise and a claim all at once. They were married 3 weeks later in Columbia's small church, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Harrison cried happily throughout the ceremony. Miss Thornton had made Adelaide's wedding dress, simple but elegant, appropriate for a new life in the West. Adelaide had no family present, but as she looked around at the friends she had made, at the community that had embraced her, she didn't feel their absence as keenly as she might have. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, when Nathan kissed her in front of everyone, Adelaide felt something inside her settle into place. This was right. This was real. This was the life she had chosen. The ranch house that Nathan brought her home to was smaller than the Philadelphia mansion she had grown up in, but it was well built and comfortable. Nathan carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in what was now their bedroom. I know it's not what you're used to, Nathan said, suddenly uncertain. It's rough compared to Philadelphia. Adelaide looked around the room, at the sturdy furniture Nathan had built himself, at the colorful quilt on the bed made by his mother back in Ohio, at the window that looked out over miles of open land. It's perfect, she said honestly. It's ours. Their wedding night was tender and awkward and wonderful. Two people learning each other, claiming each other, becoming something new together. Afterward, Lying in Nathan's arms, Adelaide felt a contentment she had never known was possible. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Adelaide answered truthfully. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if the train hadn't wrecked, if you hadn't found me. I'd be married to James Whitmore right now, living in Sacramento, wondering if this feeling even existed." "I think about that too," Nathan admitted. "How easily I might have missed you, if I'd gone a different direction looking for those cattle, if I'd arrived an hour later. Makes me grateful for every second I have with you." Building a life together on the Rolling S Ranch required hard work from both of them. Adelaide learned practical skills she had never needed in Philadelphia. Cooking on a wood stove, managing a household without servants, helping with ranch accounts and correspondence. She discovered she had a gift for organization and numbers, streamlining Nathan's record-keeping and helping him make better business decisions. She also discovered that she genuinely loved ranch life, the physical labor and tangible results, the close connection to the land and animals. Nathan, in turn, encouraged Adelaide's continuing education. He brought her books from Sacramento on his supply runs, newspapers and journals that kept her connected to the wider world. When Adelaide expressed interest in helping at the Columbia Schoolhouse, teaching reading and writing to ranch children who couldn't attend regular school, Nathan supported her completely, adjusting their schedule to make it possible. "You're good at this," Nathan observed one evening, watching Adelaide prepare lessons for her students. "Teaching, I mean. The kids love you." "I love them," Adelaide said, looking up from her papers. "It feels important, you know? Helping them learn to read, giving them opportunities they might not otherwise have." "That mattering you wanted," Nathan said softly. "Looks like you found it." Adelaide smiled at her husband, love swelling in her chest. "I found a lot of things I wanted. Some I didn't even know I was looking for." Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. A drought that summer tested their resources and resilience. Adelaide learned what it meant to be a rancher's wife when Nathan spent long days and nights dealing with cattle and depleted water sources. But they faced it together, supporting each other through the stress and uncertainty. When the rains finally came that fall, they stood on the porch watching the storm roll in, Nathan's arms wrapped around Adelaide from behind. "We made it," he said against her hair. "Together. Always together," Adelaide agreed. That winter brought news that changed everything. Adelaide had been feeling unwell for several weeks, exhausted and queasy in the mornings. When Mrs. Harrison came to visit and observed Adelaide's symptoms, she smiled knowingly. "My dear, I think you're expecting," she said gently. The confirmation from Dr. Harrison a few days later sent Adelaide's emotions into chaos. She was thrilled and terrified in equal measure. A baby, a child of her own, and Nathan's. But what did she know about being a mother? Her own mother had been distant, more concerned with social standing than genuine connection with her daughters. "I don't know how to do this," Adelaide confessed to Nathan that night, tears streaming down her face. "What if I'm terrible at it? What if I fail?" Nathan held her close, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "You won't fail, Adelaide. You're smart and caring and strong, and you won't be doing this alone. I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." "Promise?" Adelaide's voice was small, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. "Promise," Nathan said firmly. "We're a team, remember? Everything we do together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Adelaide's fears. She continued working at the dress shop until her expanding belly made it impractical, and she kept up with her teaching even longer, the ranch children delighted by the prospect of Miss Adelaide's baby. Nathan was attentive and protective without being overbearing, making sure Adelaide had everything she needed while still respecting her independence. "I'm pregnant, not fragile," Adelaide reminded him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know," Nathan said with a grin, "but humor me. I like taking care of you." Their son was born on a warm May evening, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the entire ranch. Nathan was there for the birth, holding Adelaide's hand and offering encouragement, present in a way that was unconventional but felt absolutely right. When Dr. Harrison placed the baby in Adelaide's arms, she looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt love explode in her chest with an intensity that was almost frightening. "He's beautiful," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're beautiful. God, Adelaide, I love you so much." They named him Nicholas Crawford Steele, honoring both families despite the estrangement from Adelaide's. Nicholas was a demanding baby, colicky and fussy. But Adelaide found that motherhood suited her better than she had feared. She learned to read his cries, to understand what he needed, and true to his word, Nathan was fully involved, walking the floors with Nicholas at night, changing diapers without complaint, completely besotted with his son. "You're a good father," Adelaide told him one night, watching as he rocked Nicholas to sleep with practiced ease. "I have a good teacher," Nathan replied, smiling at her. "You're amazing with him, Adelaide. You're amazing, period." As Nicholas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Nathan's hard work and Adelaide's organizational skills paid off in increased cattle sales and growing reputation. They hired more men, expanded their grazing land, built a larger barn. The Rolling S became one of the more successful ranches in the region, and Adelaide took quiet pride in knowing she had contributed to that success. Adelaide's teaching also grew into something more formal. With support from several ranch families, she established a small school that met 3 times a week, providing education for children who lived too far from Columbia to attend regular school. It was exhausting work managing both the school and the ranch household, especially with an active toddler, but Adelaide thrived on it. "I don't know how you do it all," Sarah from the boarding house said during a visit, watching Adelaide simultaneously help a student with arithmetic while Nicholas played nearby. "You're like 3 people rolled into one." "I have a lot of help," Adelaide said honestly. "Nathan is an equal partner in everything, and the community here is wonderful. Everyone supports each other." When Nicholas was 3 years old, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she felt more confident, more prepared. Nathan was delighted, already dreaming about expanding their family even further. "Maybe a girl this time," he said hopefully. "Someone to balance out all the male energy around here." But their second child was another boy, Benjamin, who arrived during a spectacular thunderstorm that seemed fitting for his dramatic personality. Where Nicholas had been fussy and demanding, Benjamin was placid and content, happy to observe the world from Adelaide's arms with curious eyes. "He's easier," Adelaide said gratefully when Benjamin was a few months old, actually sleeping through most nights. "Lulling us into complacency," Nathan joked. "Next one will probably be the most difficult yet." There was a next one, a daughter named Alice who arrived 2 years later. And Nathan had been right. Alice was demanding and strong-willed from birth, refusing to do anything on anyone's schedule but her own. But she was also joyful and affectionate, filling the ranch house with laughter and music. "She's just like her mother," Nathan said fondly, watching as 5-year-old Alice organized her brothers into some elaborate game of her own devising. Smart and stubborn and absolutely sure of what she wants. "I was never that confident as a child," Adelaide protested, but she was smiling. "Maybe not outwardly," Nathan agreed, "but it was always there, wasn't it? That strength, that determination. You just needed the chance to let it out." Adelaide thought about the woman she had been on that train heading to Sacramento, dutiful and trapped and resigned to a life she didn't want. She thought about lying in the desert, thinking she would die without ever really living, and she looked at the life she had built. A ranch that thrived, children who were healthy and happy, a marriage that was partnership and passion and deep, abiding love, a community that valued her contributions, work that mattered, freedom she had claimed for herself. "I'm glad the train wrecked," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the admission. Nathan looked at her sharply. "Adelaide, people died." "I know, and that's terrible. I don't mean I'm glad about that part, but for myself, for my life, I'm glad. If it hadn't happened, I never would have found this, found you, found myself, really." Nathan pulled her close, understanding in his eyes. "I know what you mean. As terrible as the circumstances were, they brought you to me, and I can't regret that." When Nicholas turned 7, he began helping more seriously on the ranch, riding alongside Nathan to check fences and move cattle. Benjamin, at 4, was already showing signs of being a natural horseman, fearless in the saddle. And Alice, just 2, followed Adelaide everywhere, chattering constantly and demanding to help with everything. "You've got your hands full," Miss Thornton observed during a visit to the ranch. She had become a close friend over the years, often coming out for Sunday dinners. 3 children in the school and helping run this place, I'm exhausted just watching you." "It's a good kind of full," Adelaide said, watching her children play in the yard while Nathan worked nearby. "Some days are hard, especially when everyone needs something at once. But I wouldn't trade it for anything." As the children grew, Adelaide made sure they understood their unique family history. She told them about Philadelphia, about the train wreck, about choosing to build a different life than the one planned for her. She wanted them to understand that life was full of choices, that circumstances didn't have to define you. "Will we ever meet your family?" Nicholas asked when he was 10, old enough to understand what estrangement meant. "Your mother and father, your sisters?" Adelaide felt the old pain, though dulled by years. "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope someday. I've written letters over the years, but I've never received responses. Maybe when you're older, if you want to try reaching out to them, you can." "I don't need them," Nicholas said with the fierce loyalty of childhood. "We have family here. We have the ranch family." It was true. The Rolling S had grown into more than just a business. The men who worked there were loyal, many having been with Nathan for years. Their families had become part of the ranch community. Children growing up together, holidays celebrated as a group. Adelaide had found the connection and belonging she had never felt in Philadelphia's rigid social structure. The years rolled by with the rhythm of ranch life. Seasons of hard work followed by seasons of harvest and celebration. Dry years that tested their reserves and wet years that brought abundance. The children grew strong and capable, each developing their own personality and interests. Nicholas inherited his father's quiet competence and love of the land. Benjamin was the adventurous one, always pushing boundaries and seeking new experiences. Alice proved to be brilliant with numbers, helping Adelaide with ranch accounts by the time she was 8. Nathan and Adelaide's love deepened and matured, becoming something even stronger than the passionate attraction that had drawn them together. They learned each other's moods and needs, developed the kind of wordless communication that came from years of partnership. They still made time for themselves, stealing moments alone when possible, riding out to special spots on the ranch where they could watch the sunset and remember the people they had been when they first met. "Do you ever regret it?" Adelaide asked one such evening when the children were with Mrs. Harrison in town and they had the ranch house to themselves. "Taking on a woman with no money, no skills, nothing to offer but herself?" Nathan turned to her with such love in his eyes that Adelaide's breath caught. "Adelaide Steele, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You brought intelligence and organization to this ranch. You've raised 3 amazing children. You've built a school that's educating the next generation. But more than any of that, you've been my partner in every sense of the word. You've made me better, made my life better, and I thank God every day that I found you in that desert." Adelaide kissed him, pouring years of love and gratitude into it. "I love you, Nathan Steele, more than I knew it was possible to love someone." Their 20th wedding anniversary arrived with surprising speed. It seemed impossible that 2 decades had passed since that afternoon, when Nathan had found her wandering lost in the Nevada desert. Adelaide was 42 now, Nathan 47. Their children were 17, 14, and 12, nearly grown. The ranch had expanded significantly, one of the largest and most successful in the region. Adelaide's school had evolved into a proper institution, with a dedicated building and 2 additional teachers. They threw a party to celebrate, inviting everyone from Columbia and the surrounding ranches. It was a joyous occasion, filled with music and dancing and laughter. Adelaide wore a beautiful dress that Alice had helped her pick out, her hair styled by Lily from the old boarding house. Nathan wore his best suit, though Adelaide thought he looked most handsome in his everyday work clothes, sun-weathered and real. 20 years, Nathan said during a quiet moment, pulling Adelaide close for a dance. "And you're more beautiful now than the day I found you." "Now you're just being kind," Adelaide protested, though she was smiling. "I have gray hair and wrinkles I didn't have then." "I have them too," Nathan pointed out. "We earned them together, building this life. I think that makes them beautiful." As they danced, Adelaide caught sight of Nicholas waltzing with a young woman from town, Sarah's daughter, Emma. Benjamin was telling exaggerated stories to a group of younger children, making them laugh. Alice was deep in conversation with Miss Thornton about bookkeeping techniques. Their children were becoming adults, preparing to build their own lives. "They'll leave soon," Adelaide said, feeling the bittersweet pang of approaching change. "Nicholas is already talking about starting his own ranch." "They'll leave, but they'll come back," Nathan said confidently. "This is home. We built it for them as much as for us. And Adelaide, when they do leave, it'll just be you and me again. I'm looking forward to that too, having you all to myself." The prospect sent a warm shiver through Adelaide. After years of raising children and building the ranch, the idea of time alone with Nathan was appealing. One afternoon, several months after the anniversary party, a carriage arrived at the ranch, expensive and out of place in the rough countryside. Adelaide was in the garden when she heard it approach, and something about the quality of the vehicle made her heart skip with a mixture of hope and dread. A woman stepped out, older but still beautiful, wearing elegant traveling clothes. For a long moment, Adelaide simply stared, unable to process what she was seeing. Then the woman spoke, her voice trembling. "Adelaide, is it really you?" "Catherine?" Adelaide's voice was barely a whisper. Her youngest sister, who had been 12 when Adelaide left, was now a woman of 32. Catherine crossed the distance between them quickly, pulling Adelaide into a fierce embrace. Both women were crying, 20 years of separation breaking apart in that moment. "I've been searching for you for months," Catherine said when they finally pulled apart. "After Mother died last year, I found your letters. All the letters you sent over the years that Father never gave us. Adelaide, we never knew. We thought you had abandoned us." The revelation was crushing. "I wrote so many times. I thought you didn't want to hear from me." "Never," Catherine said fiercely. "We missed you terribly. Margaret and I, we grieved losing you. Father forbade us from even speaking your name, but we never stopped thinking about you." They talked for hours, catching up on 2 decades of life. Catherine had married well to a man she actually loved and had 4 children of her own. Margaret, their middle sister, had become a teacher and married a professor. Their mother had died peacefully, but had expressed regret in her final days about the estrangement from Adelaide. "She wanted to write to you, wanted to mend things," Catherine said, "but Father wouldn't allow it. After she died, I decided I didn't care what Father thought anymore. You're my sister, and I needed to find you." Nathan and the children welcomed Catherine warmly, the house filling with conversation and laughter as Catherine met her nieces and nephew for the first time. She stayed for a week, getting to know Adelaide's family and seeing the life her sister had built. "You're happy," Catherine observed one evening as she and Adelaide sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Truly happy. I can see it in everything about you." "I am," Adelaide confirmed. "It wasn't easy, and there were times I was terrified I'd made a terrible mistake. But choosing this life, choosing Nathan, choosing myself, it was the best decision I ever made." "I'm glad," Catherine said sincerely. "Though I'll admit, when I first started searching for you, I was half afraid I'd find you living in poverty and regret. Instead, I find you running a successful ranch, educating children, married to a man who looks at you like you hung the moon. You proved Father wrong about everything." Before Catherine left, she extracted a promise from Adelaide to visit Philadelphia. "Not to see Father," she clarified quickly. "But Margaret and I both want to see you, want our children to know each other. You have family, Adelaide, you always did." The reunion with her sisters brought a sense of completion to Adelaide's life. She and Nathan did eventually travel to Philadelphia, a trip that was bittersweet and ultimately healing. Her father refused to see her, clinging to his pride and anger until the end. But Adelaide made peace with that. She had tried, had extended forgiveness and an invitation to reconciliation. His refusal was his loss, not hers. As the children grew into adults, they each found their own paths. Nicholas did start his own ranch with Emma, building something successful just a few miles from the Rolling S. They gave Adelaide and Nathan their first grandchildren, twin girls who were the joy of their grandparents' lives. Benjamin, true to his adventurous nature, became a lawman, working as a deputy in Sacramento. He wrote long letters home about his work, about the challenges of bringing order to a still wild land. He eventually married a saloon owner's daughter, scandalizing some of the more respectable families, but making his parents laugh with delight. Alice surprised everyone by becoming a banker, moving to San Francisco, and becoming one of the few female financiers in California. She remained unmarried, devoted to her career, though she came home often to visit and help Adelaide and Nathan with ranch finances. "I learned from the best," Alice said during one such visit when Adelaide was 60 and still helping manage the ranch accounts. "You showed me that women could do more than just marry well and manage households. You showed me we could build our own lives." Adelaide felt tears sting her eyes. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Of all of you. You've each become exactly who you were meant to be. Nathan retired from the most physical ranch work in his late 60s, turning over day-to-day operations to Nicholas and the experienced ranch hands. But he never truly stopped working, always finding projects and ways to contribute. Adelaide continued teaching until she was 70, only stepping back when her eyesight began to fail. They spent their later years, much as they had spent their younger ones, together. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren run across the land they had built together. They took slow rides around the ranch, Nathan pointing out improvements and changes, Adelaide adding her own observations. They hosted large family gatherings that brought together the sprawling Steele clan, including Catherine and her family, Margaret and hers, creating the kind of loving, connected family Adelaide had always dreamed of. "Remember when I found you in the desert?" Nathan asked one evening when they were both in their 70s, sitting on their porch and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "You looked like death warmed over. But even then, I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." Adelaide laughed, the sound warm and rich despite her age. "I remember thinking you might be a hallucination. Then I remember thinking how green your eyes were." "Still are," Nathan said with a grin, waggling his eyebrows and making Adelaide laugh harder. "You're ridiculous," she said fondly, taking his weathered hand in hers. Their hands were both spotted with age now, marked by decades of hard work and life lived fully. "I'm grateful," Nathan corrected. "Every single day, Adelaide. Grateful that train wrecked, grateful I went looking for those cattle, grateful I found you. Everything good in my life came from that moment." "Mine too," Adelaide said softly. "Though I wouldn't have believed it at the time if someone had told me. Lying there in the desert, certain I was dying, I couldn't have imagined all of this. The ranch, the children, the grandchildren, you, a whole lifetime of love and purpose and meaning." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun continued its descent, the kind of silence that only came from decades of companionship. Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the rigid confines of Philadelphia society to the freedom of the western ranch lands. She thought about the train wreck that had shattered her old life and made space for a new one. She thought about Nathan carrying her to safety, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. "Do you have any regrets?" Nathan asked, echoing the question Adelaide had asked him so many times over the years. Adelaide considered carefully, as she always did. "I regret the pain I caused my mother and sisters. I regret the years we lost with them. But I don't regret the choices I made. Those choices gave me you, gave me this life. If I had to do it all again, knowing everything that would happen, I'd make the same decisions." "Good," Nathan said, lifting her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Because I'd find you all over again, carry you to safety all over again, fall in love with you all over again. In this life and any other." Adelaide leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. She thought about all the moments that had brought them to this one, the fear and pain of the train wreck, the uncertainty of those first days in Columbia, the joy of their wedding, the exhaustion and triumph of building the ranch, the pride of watching their children grow, the peace of growing old together. She had been lost once, wandering in the desert, certain her story was ending. Instead, a cowboy had found her and carried her not just to safety, but to life. Real life, full and rich, and exactly what Adelaide had always needed even when she didn't know what to ask for. From that terrible moment of disaster had come everything beautiful and meaningful in her world. "I love you, Nathan Steele," Adelaide said into the gathering dusk, "more with every passing year." "And I love you, Adelaide Steele," Nathan replied, "my brave, brilliant, beautiful wife. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life. Thank you for every day we've had together." The sun finally slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of purple and indigo. Stars began to emerge, the same stars that had watched over them that first night when Nathan carried Adelaide through the darkness toward Columbia. The ranch settled into evening quiet, the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the corrals, the soft murmur of voices from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands were settling in for the night. Inside the house, Adelaide could hear their great-granddaughter practicing piano, the hesitant notes of a beginner learning scales. Nicholas and Emma's family was staying the week, filling the house with the noise and joy of multiple generations under one roof. Tomorrow there would be a big family dinner, all their children and grandchildren gathering to celebrate Nathan's 75th birthday. Adelaide had been planning it for weeks, and Catherine and Margaret were both traveling from the east to attend. "We should go in," Nathan said reluctantly. "Emma will have dinner ready, and you know she worries if we're out too long." "Just another minute," Adelaide said, unwilling to leave this perfect moment. "Look at the first star. Make a wish." Nathan chuckled. "At my age, I've already gotten everything I could wish for." "Me too," Adelaide agreed, "but make one anyway." They both closed their eyes, and Adelaide silently wished for more time, more moments exactly like this one. When she opened her eyes, Nathan was watching her with such tenderness that it took her breath away even after all these years. "What did you wish for?" he asked. "More of this," Adelaide said honestly. "More sunsets with you, more family dinners, more ordinary, extraordinary moments. I know we can't have forever, but I want as much time as possible." "Then that's what we'll have," Nathan said firmly, as if he could command the universe through sheer force of will. "As many years as we can get, Adelaide, and we'll make every single one of them count." He stood carefully, his joints creaking with age, and offered Adelaide his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet, and they walked together into the house, into the warmth and light and love that filled every corner of the home they had built. The years continued to unfold gently for Nathan and Adelaide. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by what seemed like half of California, the ranch overflowing with family and friends who had been part of their journey. Adelaide wore a dress that Alice had commissioned from San Francisco, elegant but comfortable. Nathan wore his wedding suit, carefully preserved and still fitting surprisingly well. 50 years, the preacher said during the ceremony of renewal they held, a testament to love, commitment, and partnership. Nathan and Adelaide Steele are proof that when two people truly choose each other, truly see each other, the results are miraculous. Nicholas gave a speech that left hardly a dry eye in attendance, talking about growing up watching his parents' love story unfold, about learning what marriage should be from their example. Emma added her own words about being welcomed into the family, about Adelaide teaching her strength, and Nathan teaching her kindness. Benjamin rode in from Sacramento with stories about his parents' legendary courtship, embellished to dramatic effect. Alice presented them with a ledger she had created, documenting 50 years of the ranch's growth, a numerical representation of what they had built together. Catherine and Margaret were both there with their families. The Crawford sisters reunited and determined to never lose each other again. They took a photograph together, 3 elderly women who had taken different paths but shared unbreakable bonds. Adelaide kept that photograph on the mantle, treasure among treasures. When Adelaide was 78, she suffered a mild stroke that left her partially paralyzed on her left side. Nathan refused to let it defeat them, learning how to help her with daily tasks while still respecting her dignity and independence. He hired help for the heavier work, but he personally assisted Adelaide with dressing, eating, moving around the house. "You don't have to do this," Adelaide said one morning, frustrated by her body's betrayal. "We have people who could help." "I want to do it," Nathan said simply. "Adelaide, you let me carry you when you couldn't walk on your own. You let me help you build a whole new life. This is just another kind of carrying, and I'll do it as long as I have strength in my body." Adelaide cried, but they were tears of gratitude rather than frustration. She had spent her life with a man who saw partnership as sacred, who never considered her needs a burden. Even now, when she was diminished physically, Nathan treated her with the same love and respect he always had. With Nathan's patient help and her own stubborn determination, Adelaide regained much of her functionality. She would never be quite what she had been before the stroke, but she could move around with a cane, could still read and write, could still engage with the world around her. The grandchildren visited often, reading to her, sharing news, bringing the outside world to her when traveling became difficult. Nathan's health began to fail more noticeably when he was 82. His heart, the doctor said, was wearing out after 8 decades of hard use. He tired easily, needed help with tasks that had once been second nature. Adelaide became his caretaker, as he had been hers, and together they navigated this final chapter with the same partnership that had defined their entire marriage. "I'm not afraid," Nathan told Adelaide one night as they lay in bed, his breathing labored. "I've had a good life, the best life. No regrets, no wishes for things to be different, just gratitude for every moment. "Don't talk like that," Adelaide said, though she knew the truth as well as he did. "You're not going anywhere yet. We have more time." "We've had 54 years," Nathan said gently. "That's more than most people get. And Adelaide, when my time comes, whenever that is, I need you to know something. Finding you in that desert, loving you, building this life with you, it was the greatest honor of my existence. You made me better than I ever could have been alone." Adelaide pressed her face against Nathan's chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady if slow. "You saved me," she whispered. "In every way a person can be saved. I don't know how to exist in a world without you in it." "The same way you existed before the train wreck," Nathan said. "You'll find your strength. Figure out who you are. Keep building and growing. That's who you are, Adelaide. A survivor, a builder, someone who turns tragedy into triumph." Nathan passed away peacefully 3 weeks later, in his sleep with Adelaide beside him, holding his hand. He was 82 years old, having lived a full, rich life surrounded by love. The funeral was enormous, testament to how many lives Nathan had touched over his years in California. Cowboys and bankers, ranch hands and business owners, family and friends, all came to pay respects to a man who had been unfailingly honest, hardworking, and kind. Adelaide grieved deeply, but not destructively. She had known this day would come eventually, had been preparing herself even as she hoped for more time. And true to Nathan's predictions, she found the strength to continue. She was 80 years old, physically diminished, but mentally sharp. She had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren who needed her. She had a legacy to protect and stories to tell. She lived another 7 years, remaining in the ranch house that she and Nathan had made into a home. Nicholas and Emma moved into the house with her, unwilling to let her live alone, filling the space once again with family. Adelaide spent her days reading, writing letters, teaching the youngest great-grandchildren their letters and numbers. She told stories about Nathan, about their life together, making sure future generations would know the man who had built the foundation they all stood on. On warm evenings, Adelaide would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, remembering. She remembered being 22 and lost, being found and carried to safety, being given the chance to choose her own path. She remembered falling in love, building a ranch, raising children, growing old with her best friend and greatest love. She remembered every moment of joy and challenge, every triumph and trial that had filled 54 years of marriage and 61 years in California. Adelaide Crawford Steele passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87, surrounded by family, loved and honored. They buried her next to Nathan in the ranch cemetery, under a spreading oak tree with a view of the land they had built together. The headstone was simple. Adelaide Crawford Steele, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She was lost, and she was found. She chose love. The ranch continued to thrive under Nicholas's management and eventually passed to his children and grandchildren. Adelaide's school became a permanent institution in Columbia, eventually named the Crawford Steele Academy in honor of its founder. The family she and Nathan created spread across California and beyond, descendants carrying forward the values of hard work, integrity, and choosing love over obligation. Years later, when historians wrote about the building of the American West, about the people who had transformed wilderness into civilization, they sometimes mentioned the train wreck of 1878 and the remarkable woman who survived it. They wrote about Adelaide Crawford, who had walked away from privilege to build something real in the rough country of California. They wrote about her partnership with Nathan Steele, about the ranch they created and the community they fostered. But the true story, the one that mattered most, was simpler than historical accounts could capture. It was the story of a woman who was lost and a man who found her, of two people who saw each other truly and chose each other completely, of a love that started with one person carrying another to safety and grew into a lifetime of carrying each other through every joy and challenge. It was a love story set against the backdrop of the Wild West, filled with all the drama and adventure that landscape provided. But at its heart, it was simply the story of Adelaide and Nathan, two souls who found each other at exactly the right moment and built a life that exceeded anything either of them had imagined possible. And it was a story with the happiest of endings, not because it was free from pain or challenge, but because it was filled with love, purpose, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived together.